Anyway, so we'll just swing with any interruptions that might happen. I'm having a lovely time here with my family. My father grew up in this forest. Like, they have a mountain named after my grandfather and lakes named after my aunts and uncles and my father, and it's a real soul home for us. And since my parents died, my 5 brothers and 2 sisters and I like to get together up here and camp out together and have a little family reunion. So this morning I woke up and I thought, I'm so spiritually connected to this place. I'd like to talk about how I work spiritually with the Bengston Method. Now, I devised this group so that you don't have to know anything about the Bengston Method in order to join and benefit from it. But I'm going to talk a little technically about that, because a lot of people do find me because they're already familiar with that method. All right, so you may have noticed that the name of my website is spiritgate.com. The name of this Facebook group is Spirit Gate Cancer Support. And this word is sort of being bandied about as if people know what I mean. And I thought, well, let me just explain what I mean by spiritual. And I tell people that the way I do the Bengston Method is a way that includes spirituality. And I think that parts of it are inherently psychological and parts of it are inherently spiritual. And I actually have a distinction between those. So I'd like to talk about that. And the reason I think this is important is that in my about 15 years of doing the Bengston Method, and before then 25 years of just being an acupuncturist and a nutritionist, I learned that the spiritual matters. I've seen the Bengston Method work on people, and I've seen it not work on people. Same thing with acupuncture and other natural healing methods that I do. And I see several trends in people for whom it doesn't work. And one of those trends, just one of them, is the lack of a spiritual connection to the process. Or you could say not engaging as a whole person in the process. And part of our whole being, there's a spiritual part of us. And if we leave that part out in order to feign objectivity and rigor, we're missing something. And I notice that the people I've known that did the Bengston Method exactly, perfectly, and they still died, or their cancer it was like a dead battery with them, or very little response. They weren't engaged totally. And so I like to use the word spirit to help you reach beyond, like, okay, what do you mean totally? I need this to work. I really need this to work. So I'll explain that. So one of our human characteristics that we sometimes try to ignore in pursuit, I'll just read this, in pursuit of scientific rigor and objectivity is our spirituality. I think this is like studying a fish while ignoring the water. The spiritual soup that we live in does affect us profoundly. And it's not hard to sense and cultivate if you know what to notice. If you were asked to ask a fish about the water, the fish might say, "What water?" It's so everywhere, it doesn't seem like anything we can manipulate or control, so why would we focus on it? The fish don't appreciate that their physical apparatus, their bodies, is tuned in to the temperature, the depth, the nutritional quality, and the other qualities in the water. And they just swim where it feels good, and they take it for granted. And different fish feel good in different parts of the ocean with different environments. And you could say that different people feel good in different spiritual environments. And so what does this have to do with cancer? So I suggest that cancer is not just cause physically. So like you might have a genetic predisposition, or you might get radiation. One might get radiation damage. Not only a life force, which is your sense of vitality, your life body, which is maybe like a waning immune system due to aging. Lots of things can affect the life force. And not only an emotional disease due to past emotional traumas interfering with immunity, but also a spiritual disease, which would be the lack of the ego or the I, the part of us that can say I, coming into life. And often this leaves because of trauma, but it can also leave for physical reasons. It can also leave for life force reasons. The gusto that a child has for life is just a little different than the gusto that an 80-year-old has for life. There's a different quality to it. So the whole person or pet has a disease. So the physical, the life force, the emotional, and the spiritual, the whole thing has the disease. And so in my therapy, I like to focus on all of them. I work with herbs, I work with nutrition, I work with getting rid of toxic radiation, I work with, detoxifying, I work with emotional exercises, and I also work with spiritual things. And I feel like this makes sense. It just makes sense to work with the whole person, especially when doing the Bengston Method. It's very much part of his system to focus on the whole person, not the disease. Now, once I'd start saying the word spiritual word, let me define that. So nomenclature definitions can help. So in my mind, the word spirit can mean anything from a ghost to a ghost to a thought, because thinking is a spiritual activity. And all religious and philosophic machinations attempt to put words and metaphors into this this dimension of our humanity. And if you could say, like, if you could have a hierarchy schedule, like I have my octave resonance healing, we have the octave resonance healing approach. We have the physical level, we have the life force level, we have the emotions, we have the images, then we have the spiritual, which include the bottom of the spiritual is thinking, and then there's the places beyond thinking. You could call that the supraconscious. All right. And so with that definition of it's just the more refined aspect of our being, let's proceed. So spiritual health is cultivated. It doesn't just happen. So, like, you can take it for granted, and in some ways that's nice, but you can cultivate it, especially if you're trying to heal. Like, maybe you're a fish swimming in a spiritual soup that you weren't even aware was polluted. You're trying to clean up your act a little bit. You're trying to detoxify your body, but you're also trying to commune with a lighter, more truer version of yourself than usual. You would say that's, swimming to fresher waters. And so the cultivation of spiritual health is super, super, super individual. And it has to do with your own self's relationship to the divine, to the creator, to truth, to whatever subcategories of this that you find interesting. Genuine spirituality needs to be authentically about yourself and this quality or being or consciousness that all human beings experience. They don't always give language to it, but it is part of being of a human being, is having this spiritual part to us. Let's see. I teach my clients how to think clearly about their healing process. Think clearly about how they experience with their senses and with their awareness their own healing. So this observational method, I kind of keep drumming about it as we're observing. This is the spiritual activity. And it's in all major paradigms. It's certainly in the scientific paradigm that I would call that a spiritual activity, observing the results, analyzing them statistically, thinking really clearly about what's going on. That's different than just sensing with your sight or your sound, your ears or your nose or your taste. It's like this witnessing higher level view of what's going on. And I think that's valid. There's other ways to be spiritual, of course, other than scientific. Most philosophies are spiritual activities. A lot of psychology is a spiritual activity. A lot of therapy is radically spiritual, as you really connect with yourself, that self that endures through all your experiences. I think that to tell people to not be spiritual when they're doing the Bengston Method is just as short-sighted as religions who promise that if you believe hard enough and keep enough commandments that you'll be healed. I feel like these extremes are just not helpful. There's a duality there, and they polarize with each other, but really the freedom is right in the middle, where you're free to step above all that. So what if there's a different way of looking at spirituality, something simple and cross-cultural and observable? What if you could be a spiritual scientist and let go of all the complications of philosophy and religion and just be here now? Being here now, present, grounded in physical, life force, emotional, and spiritual reality. One can spiritually observe and then give language to, for example, the fact that after a good healing session, one feels good. Sort of like a fish saying, oh, it feels better over here. There's a sense of relaxation, integrity, kind of like you're coming home to yourself. You feel more like yourself after a good healing. And I suggest that this sense of self is a spiritual awareness. It's not a religious awareness. It's a spiritual awareness that is cross-cultural. And it's just a basic human quality. You don't believe in it, you experience it. I'm going to say that again. You don't believe in this spiritual experience, you experience this spiritual experience. And I think that tuning into this quality that's very human helps the healing process, no matter what you're doing, but especially using the Bengston Method. Now, of course, sometimes there's healing crises where you don't feel good and you're actually healing, and a good therapist or a conscious person can sense the difference of when you're going down the wrong path and when this is some ugly guck that's coming up for release. Yeah. All right, so how do I work spiritually with the Bengston Method? I've got a long list that could be like longer. So let me just read that. While working on, and if you're not familiar with the Bengston Method, you can learn it from him. I'll include a link here somewhere, and you should do that. This is really for people who've already understand what I'm talking about with the Bengston Method. So when working on one lists of desires, one of the measures of if the image is good is that not only are you happy with the attainment of your desire, but you also feel more like yourself. That's a better fit for who I am. Number 2, I help clients spiritually program each item on the list, which is a way of using your supraconscious to refine and tweak your images so that when you look at them in your imagination, they feed you, they give you life energy that's palpable, observable, and true. Number 3, artistically interact with the list. I told you that thinking is a spiritual activity. Well, art is also a spiritual activity, and you can ponder that if you want. Number 4, if a client is inclined towards prayer, I encourage them to pray about each item on their list. And that's where I put prayer. I don't try to combine prayer with hypercycling as much as I pray with each item on the list. Because prayer is a slow motion activity. usually. Anyway, I can talk more about prayer another time. And then I encourage, number 5, I encourage a spiritual relationship between you and your desires. This relationship is living, creative, malleable, and enjoyable. Not only do you want your desires, but they want to come into you in their life. So what you want wants you. And when drilling the image, going image, 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 I teach clients to observe the bonds in their emotional feeling matrix that kind of holds their world together being broken. And it's not hard to observe this. I don't know anybody who can't feel that happening when they do that, if they're aware of it. It's just like you just have to notice it. Number 6, when hypercycling, I encourage personal research. Okay? Personal awareness, personal thinking, so you can tweak the various different aspects of spinning. You don't have to believe that hypercycling is working. You don't have to wonder if it's working. You can think about and observe the physical, life force, emotional, and spiritual changes that are happening. So it takes belief out of the picture and actually makes it an authentic spiritual experience. Number 7, when giving a treatment, I train how to observe not only the physical and life force and emotional shifts, but also spiritual shifts. To continue with the fish analogy, you can easily notice when the water gets clearer or murkier, and then do certain things. There is a cause and effect thing often. Sometimes there's a grace thing, but it's all observable if you observe it. Number 8, it's not about doing it right, which would be akin to a belief in a method, which cuts it off. It's about having a living, genuine connection to the process. So if you're married, do you believe you're married, or you just are married and you're having a relationship with your spouse? It's not like, oh, I believe I'm married to him. You're like, no, you're connected. You're married. It's not about belief. It's about a genuine connection. I can say that 4 more times. All right. Number 9, I ask from Source, and then I receive ideas and suggestions that will help my healing process or my client's healing process. And that's a spiritual activity. And then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just seems to flood out of me, the spiritual inputs that go on. Now, my best clients are those who have the capacity to do this, which is usually well-educated, psychologically aware, artistic people. And those who really enjoy working at this depth. Is it super important? I think the level you work at is the level you're at. And this is the level I like to work at. So is this the way everybody should work at this? No. But if this is your state of consciousness, then you need to work at that level of consciousness. So, to each their own, kind of like the fish finding the right part of the ocean to swim in. All right. And in a minute, we're going to get into the actual distance healing portion of this. But just know that if I can help you, I offer a complimentary Get Acquainted call. This group distance healing, the only similarity between this and the one-on-one treatments that I give is the spinning meditation. Other than that, it's a different animal when I work on one-on-one. And this healing session that we're going to go into is developed so that a newcomer can join and contribute and be helped without a lot of training. Okay? So let's see. My goal is to get you out of needing me. Oh, yeah, sorry. I actually wrote this out beforehand. The complimentary Get Acquainted, if we're a good fit, we can do 1 session or 40 sessions and everything in between. Train your family, train your friends, work within your budget. We'll just figure out what the good fit is. And my goal is to get you out of needing me and get you independently healing yourself. Because the self that that persists from when you were a baby, a teenager, older, and beyond. It's that self that's the spiritual part of you that persists, and that's what heals. That's what really does the healing. So if I can help catalyze that relationship with yourself, then that's what I like to do. All right, so if you're watching this and you're not in the Spirit Gate Cancer Support Facebook group, that means you're watching a live replay of the first portion of this event. And in a few minutes, I'm going to stop the recording and we will do the actual healing experience, healing deed. And you're welcome to join us over at the Spirit Gate Cancer Support Facebook group. And just one more announcement. I'm going to hold a free Zoom discussion of spirituality, like mindfulness, meditation, and the Bengston Method. And we're going to discuss how 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗆𝗿𝗆's meditation and presence can inform the Bengston Method and vice versa. And I could have picked any spiritual practice, but 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗆𝗿 is widely known and respected, and he has a free video series, and so just stay tuned for that. Okay, you'll hear more announcements about that. Okay.